Hello, friends. This is King English Podcast. In today's episode, you'll hear the story of English language is easy. How one voice broke free from silence and discovered freedom through English. Asterisk. Part 1. The Fear of English. Still remember. The first time I realized that English was not just a subject in school, but a wall between me and the rest of the world. I must have been 12 or 13, sitting in a noisy classroom, surrounded by classmates who seemed to answer questions more quickly, who read the strange foreign words as if they carried no weight. For me, each word was heavy, like a stone. When the teacher asked me to read aloud, I felt the heat rising to my cheeks. My tongue stiffened. My mouth refused to shape the sounds. And the laughter, soft but sharp, my classmates sliced through me like a knife. From that day on, English became fear. Not a language, not a skill, but a monster hiding in the corner of every lesson. I carried this fear with me as I grew older. In high school, whenever English class appeared on the timetable, I felt my chest tighten. My heart would beat faster. My palms sweat. I dreaded being called upon to speak, terrified of mispronouncing even the simplest word. I would memorize vocabulary lists late at night, forcing myself to stare at the same words again and again until my eyes blurred. But when the test arrived, the words vanished, like ghosts fleeing at dawn. In those years, English became a mirror of my own failure. It seemed that no matter how hard I studied, I could not keep up. My friends exchanged jokes in English. Some even started watching movies without subtitles. Meanwhile, I remained trapped in fear, unable to step forward. I remember one particular humiliation. It was during a class presentation. We were asked to prepare a short introduction about ourselves in English. I wrote my script carefully, rehearsed it again and again in my room until I could say it by heart. But the moment I stood in front of the class, facing dozens of eyes, my throat closed. The words twisted in my mouth, my pronunciation clumsy, broken. Laughter erupted again. The teacher tried to silence them, but the damage was done. I sat down, trembling, my paper crumpled in my hands. That night, I cried quietly, not because of the laughter, but because of the hopelessness pressing down on me. In university, the fear followed me like a shadow. Opportunities appeared, exchange programs, English-speaking clubs, chances to meet international students, but I avoided them all. I told myself I was too busy, but the truth was simpler. I was afraid. Afraid of being judged. Afraid of not being understood. Afraid of exposing the weakness that I had tried so hard to hide. Even outside school, English haunted me. In bookstores, I would glance at the shelves filled with English novels, their covers shining with worlds I could not enter. In cafes, I would overhear tourists asking for directions, and I would freeze, praying they would not turn to me. When English songs played on the radio, I hummed along to the melody, but never dared to follow the words. It is strange how fear grows. It does not remain the size it started with. It expands, slowly, silently, until it surrounds you. My fear of English grew into a fear of speaking itself. I became quieter in group conversations, careful not to make mistakes even in my own language. The wall I had built to keep English out began to keep me in. Sometimes, late at night, I would lie in bed and wonder why this fear had such power over me. Why did these foreign sounds matter so much? Why did the opinion of others, their laughter, their judgment control me so deeply? I wanted to believe that I was strong, that I could overcome obstacles, but each time English appeared, I became small again, the frightened child standing before the class. Years passed. I tried different methods, memorizing grammar books, downloading apps, watching movies with subtitles. Each attempt began with hope, but soon collapsed under the same weight. My fear of speaking, my fear of making mistakes, my fear of not being enough. At one point, I almost gave up completely. I told myself, maybe English is not for me. Maybe I will live my whole life without it. After all, many people survive without knowing a second language. It was easier to avoid the pain than to confront it. But even as I tried to bury the thought, English kept returning like a persistent echo. Every job posting demanded it. Every dream of travel whispered its presence. Every article, every website, every opportunity reminded me of the same truth. The world spoke English, and I was still standing outside the door. The worst part was the voice in my head. It repeated again, "You can't do this. You're not smart enough. You'll never speak fluently. Don't even try." This voice became louder than any teacher, louder than any book. It became my jailer. Looking back now, I realize that what I feared was not English itself, but the feeling of failure that it awakened in me. English had become the symbol of all the times I felt inadequate, all the moments I felt unworthy. It was never just about words, it was about me. Still, at that time, I did not see this clearly. All I knew was the weight in my chest, the silence in my mouth, the distance between me and the world I longed to reach. I would sit, sometimes, with my phone, scrolling through videos of people speaking fluent English, confident, expressive, free. I envied them, but I also resented them. How could they make it look so easy, when for me, it was a mountain I could not climb? In those moments, I convinced myself that English was not just hard, it was impossible. And yet, deep inside, a part of me refused to let go completely. That small part whispered, "What if you're wrong? What if English is not as hard as you believe? What if the difficulty is not in the language, but in your fear?" At the time, I ignored that voice, but it stayed with me, quietly, waiting, because fear, no matter how heavy, is never the whole story, and mine was only beginning. Part 2. A small opportunity happened on an ordinary afternoon, the kind of day that usually passes unnoticed. The sky was gray, the streets crowded with motorbikes, the air thick with the smell of rain. I was on the bus, heading home after another long day at university. My bag felt heavy on my lap, stuffed with books I hardly touched, and my mind drifted in the familiar fog of tiredness. The bus stopped at a red light, and the driver switched on the radio. At first, it was just background noise, voice speaking too quickly, words tumbling one over another. I didn't pay attention. I assumed it was another English program, something far beyond my reach. But then a phrase caught my ear. "Good morning, everyone." It was such a simple greeting, yet so clear, so familiar. My heart gave a small jump. I understood it instantly. I knew what it meant without translating, without effort. I looked up, as if the words had materialized in the air in front of me. The radio continued, "Today is a beautiful day. Let's talk about our plans." Again, I understood, not every word, but enough. The meaning was there, floating like a faint light in the darkness. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt with English before: recognition. I leaned closer, listening harder. The announcer's voice was calm, almost gentle. He spoke slowly, pausing between sentences. There was music in the background, soft and steady, like the rhythm of breathing. I didn't understand everything, but I could follow the general idea. He was talking about daily routines, about waking up, about going for a walk, about enjoying small things, and suddenly I realized I was listening to English. I was actually listening, not panicking, not running away. The fear that usually rose like a wall inside me was quieter now. My mind wasn't screaming, "I don't understand." Instead, it whispered, "Wait, maybe I do." That tiny realization was like a crack in the wall, a very small crack, but enough for a little light to enter. The bus continued its journey, the rain finally beginning to fall against the windows. Drops slid down the glass in long silver lines, and the announcer's voice filled the space between them. I didn't catch every word. Sometimes I felt lost. Sometimes the sentences blurred into sound. For once, I was curious. I wanted to know more. By the time I reached my stop, my heart was strangely light. I stepped off the bus into the rain. The words, "Good morning, everyone," still echoing in my mind. It was ridiculous, I told myself. I had understood only a handful of words. And yet, those few words felt like a victory. That night, I searched online for the radio program. It took me some time, but eventually I found it. It was a podcast for English learners designed to be slow and clear. I clicked play, and the same calm voice greeted me again. "Good morning, everyone." I smiled. I listened for half an hour, sitting at my desk, headphones in my ears. I didn't understand everything. Sometimes I replayed the same sentence again, frustrated. But other times, I surprised myself by following whole paragraphs. The words seemed to float differently this time, not as heavy stones, but as something softer, lighter, almost alive. That night, when I turned off my computer, I felt a spark inside me. It wasn't confidence, not yet, but it was hope. I had told myself that English was impossible, that it was too big, too complicated, too far away. But here was proof that I could understand even a little. Proof that maybe the wall wasn't as solid as I believed. The next day, I listened. Again, this time on my way to class. Earphones hidden under my hair. I caught another phrase. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. The speaker said it so kindly, as if he knew exactly what I was feeling. My throat tightened, and I almost laughed at the irony. The radio was talking directly to me. In the following weeks, listening to that podcast became my secret habit. I didn't tell anyone. It felt too fragile, too new, like a young seed that needed protection. Every day, I listened for at least 10 minutes. Some days were frustrating. The words rushed past me like water slipping through my fingers. But other days, I caught whole ideas, whole conversations. Each small success gave me a strange joy. Slowly, I began to notice changes. My ears grew sharper. Words I had memorized years ago, but forgotten, suddenly returned. Phrases I thought I would never understand now sounded familiar. English was still difficult, but it was no longer the monster in the corner. It was more like a puzzle I could slowly, patiently begin to solve. One evening, as I walked home, I heard a group of tourists talking in English. Normally, I would have looked away, avoided their eyes, hurried past. But this time, I paused. I listened. I didn't understand everything, but I caught enough. They were asking where to find a restaurant. For the first time in my life, I felt the urge to answer. I didn't, of course. Fear still held me back, but the desire was there, and that was something new. It was such a small opportunity, just a random radio program on a rainy bus ride. Yet it opened a door in my mind, a door I had kept locked for years. Looking back now, I realize that hope often enters our lives quietly, without warning. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or grand announcements. Sometimes it comes in the form of a single phrase, a single sound, a single moment of recognition. That was my moment, and though I didn't know it yet, it was the beginning of a journey that would change everything, because from that day forward, whenever I felt afraid, I remembered those words, "Good morning, everyone." And I told myself, if I can understand that, then maybe, just maybe, English is not impossible. Maybe English is easy. Part 3, The Encounter the podcast became my quiet companion. Every day, between lectures and bus rides, I carried those voices in my ears. They didn't judge me. They didn't laugh. They didn't demand perfect grammar or flawless pronunciation. They just spoke, clear, patient, and little by little, my fear loosened its grip. But life has a way of testing you when you least expect it. It was a Saturday morning when the test arrived. I had gone to a small cafe near the library, a place I often visited to escape the chaos of campus. The cafe was quiet, filled with the smell of fresh coffee and the low hum of conversations. I sat in the corner with my headphones on, listening to my podcast, scribbling random English words in my notebook. I didn't notice the man at first. He was sitting 2 tables away, older than me, perhaps in his late 30s. He wore glasses and had a book in front of him. Wasn't his appearance, but his voice. He was speaking English, real English, not the careful, slowed-down version I heard on my podcast. His words were quick, natural, flowing like water. I froze. Every instinct told me to look away, to bury my head in my notebook. For years, I had trained myself to avoid these situations. Native English speakers were danger. They carried the risk of exposure, humiliation, failure. But something was different this time. Instead of fear alone, I felt curiosity. I tilted my head, listening carefully. To my surprise, I recognized a few phrases. "This chapter is fascinating," he said. Then later, "I think the author is right." They were simple sentences, but I understood them. My heart beat faster. Then, as if fate were playing a trick, he looked up and caught my eye. He smiled politely. I panicked, glancing down at my notebook. But before I could disappear into the page, he stood up and walked over. "Excuse me," he said, gently, in English. "Do you mind if I sit here? The light is better." For a second, I forgot how to breathe. My brain screamed, "Say no, shake your head, escape." But my mouth betrayed me. "Yes," I stammered, "please." He sat down. The universe, it seemed, had trapped me. There was silence for a moment. My hands shook as I pretended to write something. Then he pointed at my notebook. "Are you learning English?" I wanted the ground to swallow me, but I couldn't lie. I nodded. "Yes," I whispered. His face lit up with kindness. "That's wonderful," he said. "English is a good tool. It can open many doors." I forced a smile. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear his words. He introduced himself, Michael, a visiting lecturer from Canada, working at the university for a semester. He spoke slowly, noticing my hesitation. His eyes were not mocking, not sharp with judgment. Instead, they were patient, like the voice in my podcast. And then he said something I'll never forget. "English language is easy. People make it complicated, but it doesn't have to be." The words landed in me like a stone dropped into a still pond, sending ripples outward. English is easy. I had spent half my life convinced of the opposite. Yet here was someone saying it with complete certainty, as if it were a simple truth. I frowned. "Easy?" I asked, my voice shaking. Not for me." Michael smiled gently. "It feels difficult because of fear. Not because of the language. English is only sounds, just like your own language. Children learn it without grammar books, without exams. You can too. The wall is not in the language, it's in the mind." I stared at him, confused, almost angry. How could he dismiss the years of my struggle with one sentence? Did he not know how many nights I had cried, how many times I had failed? And yet, a part of me wanted to believe him. We talked for a little while longer. Rather, he talked, and I listened, nodding, catching fragments. He told me stories of students who had learned English by playing, by singing, by repeating what they heard. He spoke of shadowing listening and speaking at the same time, like an echo. I caught the word shadowing and repeated it silently, too. Myself. Before he left, he said softly, "Don't be afraid of mistakes. Mistakes are proof that you're learning. Just open your ears, let English enter, and your voice will follow." When he walked out of the cafe, I sat in silence, my coffee cold, my notebook blank. His words kept circling in my head. English language is easy. I wanted to reject them. I wanted to say, "No, you don't understand. It's hard. It's impossible." But something in his calm certainty unsettled me. What if he was right? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying our conversation. His voice echoed in my memory, blending with a podcast I had listened to so many times. English is only sounds. The wall is in the mind. For years, I had carried my fear like a shield, protecting myself from humiliation. But maybe the shield was also a cage. Maybe the real enemy wasn't English, but the story I kept telling myself about English. I didn't know yet how to change. I didn't know if I had the courage. But I knew this: I could no longer pretend that English was an impossible mountain. A stranger had shown me another way of seeing it. And the thought refused to leave me the next morning. I opened my notebook and wrote in shaky letters, "English language is easy." I didn't believe it fully. Not yet, but for the first time. I wanted to. And that desire, the simple desire to believe, was the beginning of something new. Part 4. The Truth About Language. 4 days after meeting Michael, his words lingered in my head. English language is easy. They repeated themselves like a song, half annoying, half comforting. I wanted to push them away, but they kept returning, especially when I listened to my podcast or caught a word on a street sign. Finally, I gathered the courage to meet him again. I had discovered that he often visited the same cafe on Saturday mornings. So the next weekend, I went there early, my notebook tucked under my arm, my stomach a tight knot of nerves. Sure enough, he arrived, book in hand. He noticed me immediately, and his face lit up with recognition. I blushed, unsure if that label was praise or pity. But he pulled out the chair across from me without hesitation. "I've been thinking about what you said," I confessed softly. "About English being easy." Michael chuckled. "And do you believe it yet?" I shook my head. "No, not really." "That's honest," he said. "Good honesty is the first step. Now let me show you something." He reached into his bag and pulled out a sheet of paper. On it, he had written a short English sentence: "The cat sleeps." He pointed at the words. "Tell me, what do you see?" I frowned. 3 words: subject, verb, object. "Good," he said. "Now forget grammar. Forget rules. What do you hear?" He pronounced it slowly. "The cat sleeps." I listened. The sounds were simple, almost musical. THUH cot sleeps. Double quote. "Do you notice?" he asked. "It's not heavy. It's not impossible. It's just sound. Air passing through your mouth." I hesitated. "But grammar, vocabulary, there are so many rules." Michael shook his head. "Children don't know rules, yet they speak. Why? Because they listen. They imitate. they play with sounds. Language is not rules. Language is rhythm, sound, connection. His words unsettled me. All my life, English had been taught to me as rules, grammar charts, endless lists of tenses, exams with red marks. To imagine it as simply sound felt almost childish. He must have read the doubt on my face, because he smiled and leaned closer. Let me tell you something. Language is the most natural thing in the world. It is not mathematics, not science. It is breath. It is sound. It is music. Do you need a textbook to laugh? Do you need a grammar chart to cry? No, you just do it. English can be the same if you let it. I stared at the paper again. The cat sleeps. It looked so ordinary, yet the way he framed it made it feel like a doorway. Try saying it, he encouraged. My throat tightened. Speaking in front of people had always terrified me. But his expression was patient, kind. So I whispered, "The cat sleeps again," he said. This time, a little louder. "The cat sleeps. Good. Did you die?" he asked with a grin. Despite myself, I laughed. No, exactly. You survived. You spoke English. And it wasn't difficult. It was easy. Something inside me shifted. I had spoken, and the world had not ended. There had been no laughter, no humiliation, no collapse. Just sound, simple and human. Michael continued, "The problem is not English. The problem is the story you tell yourself about English. You say it's too hard, too complicated, too late. But those are just stories. Change the story, and the language changes too." I sat in silence, letting his words sink in. A part of me resisted, clinging to my old belief that English was impossible. But another part, smaller yet stubborn, whispered, "Maybe he's right. Maybe the walls are only in your head." Michael took a sip of his coffee, then added softly, "Language is not about perfection. It's about connection. If someone understands you, even with mistakes, you have succeeded. The fear of mistakes is the only real enemy." That sentence struck me deeply. All these years, I had treated mistakes like monsters, proof of my weakness. But what if they were not monsters at all? What if they were stepping stones? I looked at him, unsure of what to say. He must have seen the conflict in my eyes, because he leaned back and said, "Don't worry. Belief takes time. Just remember this. English is sound. Sound is easy. Listen, repeat, play. Let your ears lead your voice." The conversation ended, but his words stayed with me long after I left the cafe. That night, as I lay in bed, I repeated them to myself. English is sound. Sound is easy. I whispered the sentence again. The cat sleeps. It felt almost laughably simple. For the first time, I began to see English not as an enemy, but as something neutral, even gentle. The following week, I experimented. Instead of memorizing vocabulary lists, I listened carefully to my podcast and tried to repeat sentences out loud like an echo. At first, I stumbled, my tongue clumsy, my voice awkward. But slowly, the rhythm grew familiar. The sounds felt lighter on my tongue. Sometimes I caught myself smiling at how playful it felt. It wasn't easy, not yet. And different was enough. I began to notice English everywhere, in signs, in songs, in fragments of conversations. Instead of shrinking from it, I leaned closer, curious. Each word was no longer a heavy stone, it was a sound, a puzzle piece, waiting to be placed. Michael's voice echoed in my memory. The wall is in the mind. And perhaps, just perhaps, a small crack had appeared in mine. Part 5, First Step. Listening Michael's words haunted me in the best way. English is sound. Sound is easy. For years, I had stared at pages filled with rules and vocabulary lists, memorizing until my head hurt, only to forget everything when I needed it. But now, for the first time, I had been given permission to do something different, something almost childlike, to simply listen. So I began. At first, it was clumsy. I set aside 30 minutes every evening, put on my headphones, and played my podcast. The speaker's voice was slow and calm, designed for learners. I closed my eyes and forced myself to focus not on translating every word, but on the music of the language, the rise and fall of the voice, the pauses, the rhythm. It felt strange. My brain wanted to fight, to grab each word, translate it, break it into grammar rules. But I resisted. I reminded myself of Michael's advice. Listen, repeat, play. One night, the podcast host said, "Take a deep breath, relax. Don't worry about understanding everything." I laughed out loud. It felt as if the voice knew exactly what I was going through. So I obeyed. I let go of the pressure. Something shifted. The sounds began to flow differently, like water running over stones. I didn't catch every drop, but I caught the rhythm. And within the rhythm, I felt peace. I started carrying English with me everywhere. On the bus, in the library, even while brushing my teeth, I had my earphones in. Sometimes I didn't focus fully. I just let the sounds wash over me like background music. Other times, I leaned in, repeating every sentence under my breath, as if I were singing along to a melody. At first, my tongue stumbled. The sounds felt unnatural, heavy. But the more I repeated, the lighter they became. Words that once terrified me began to feel familiar, almost friendly. Morning, beautiful, listen, understand. Each one was like a new friend. Shy at first, but slowly warming to me. The biggest surprise came one rainy afternoon. I was listening to a story on the podcast about daily routines, something simple, about waking up early, drinking coffee, walking to work. Suddenly, I realized I had followed an entire paragraph without stopping. No translating, no dictionary, just listening and understanding. My chest filled with warmth. For the first time, English didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like music I could finally hum along to. That evening, I sat in front of my notebook. Instead of writing grammar rules, I wrote down the phrases that had stayed in my ears. Wake up early, drink coffee, go for a walk. I whispered them again and again. The words tasted different now, not heavy, but light. Michael was right. Listening was not passive, it was powerful. It was like planting seeds. The more I listened, the more the seeds grew roots in my mind, quietly, naturally. Of course, there were still difficult days. Sometimes the sentences ran too fast, and I felt lost. Sometimes I grew impatient, frustrated that progress was so slow. But instead of giving up, I remembered Michael's smile, his calm certainty. Sound is easy. So I tried again. I also discovered something unexpected: silence in the past. My head had been filled with noise whenever I studied English: panic, self-criticism, the voice saying, "You'll never learn this." But when I listened carefully, deeply, that noise faded. The act of listening demanded stillness. My mind, usually restless, became quiet. I could feel my breathing slow, my heart steady. English, for the first time, became not only a language, but also a meditation. One evening, I met Michael again at the cafe. He listened patiently, nodding, then said, "Good, you're learning the way a child learns. By listening, you're building the foundation. Without it, everything else collapses. With it, speaking will come naturally." I hesitated, but when will speaking come? I still feel afraid. Michael smiled. Don't rush. First, train your ears. A voice cannot grow if the ears are closed. You will speak when your heart is ready. His words reassured me. For the first time, I didn't feel the desperate urge to measure progress by tests or grades. Instead, I trusted the process. In the weeks that followed, I fell in love with listening. I listened to podcasts, songs, even short clips of movies. Sometimes I didn't understand much, but that didn't matter. I was no longer listening only for meaning. I was listening for rhythm. for melody, for life. And slowly, something extraordinary happened. The fear that had once silenced me began to soften. English was no longer a monster hiding in the shadows. It was a voice, a song, a friend whispering in my ear. One morning, while walking to class, I caught myself whispering English sentences out loud, repeating what I had heard. Good morning. How are you today? The weather is nice. Passersby gave me strange looks, but I didn't care. My voice had found a crack of freedom. It was small, fragile, but it was real. That night, I wrote in my notebook, Step 1, listen. Listening is the door. English is not noise, is music. And for the first time in my life, I believed it. Part 6, the challenge. Speaking out listening had become my comfort. Every day, my ears drank English like water. Podcasts, songs, even movie lines whispered through my headphones. Slowly, I felt a quiet strength growing inside me. But speaking, that was another world, no matter how much I listened. The moment I imagined opening my mouth in front of another person, my chest tightened. The fear returned like an old shadow. What if I make a mistake? What if they laugh? What if my tongue betrays me? One evening, I confessed this to Michael at the cafe. I can listen now, I told him. I can repeat, alone, like an echo. But when it comes to speaking with people, my voice disappears. Michael studied me for a moment, then nodded. Of course, he said calmly, listening is safe. Speaking is risk. And humans fear risk more than anything. I lowered my eyes. He was right. But, he continued, risk is where life happens. Without risk, no freedom. His words made my stomach turn. Freedom wasn't that what I wanted. To speak without fear, to live in English instead of hiding from it. Let's try something, Michael suggested. He pulled out his notebook and wrote a simple sentence. I am learning English. Say it to me, he said. My throat tightened instantly. The cafe felt too loud, too bright, too full of strangers. I shook my head. Not here. Michael's eyes softened. Fear is loud, isn't it? I nodded. Then let's whisper, he said gently. I hesitated, then leaned closer. Very softly, almost inaudible, I whispered, I am learning English. Good, he said. Now, again. A little louder. I am learning English. Louder. This time, my voice cracked, trembling. I am learning English. Michael smiled, his eyes kind. There it is. Your voice. It is not perfect, but it is alive. And alive is enough. My face burned, but inside, something shifted. I had spoken not to a mirror, not to my empty room, but to another human being. And the world had not ended. That night, I couldn't sleep. My heart kept replaying the moment. My voice had been shaky, small, but real. The memory pulsed in me like a fragile flame. The next day, I challenged myself. In the bakery near my apartment, I rehearsed quietly before entering. When it was my turn, I forced my lips to shape the words. One bread, please. My voice shook, but the cashier understood. She handed me the bread without hesitation. No laughter, no judgment. I walked home with the bread in my hands and tears in my eyes. Not from shame, but from victory. Every small moment became a battlefield, asking for directions, ordering coffee, greeting a stranger. My heart raced each time, my palms sweaty, but I forced the words out. Sometimes I stumbled, sometimes I froze, but sometimes miraculously the words flowed, and with each attempt the flame grew brighter. Still, fear never fully disappeared. Sometimes it roared, drowning out everything. Fear was not the truth. My voice could exist even in fear. One evening, I told Michael about my small victories. He listened, then said, "Do you see? The fear was never the enemy. Silence was fear, will always walk beside you. But silence kills your voice. So choose sound, even if it shakes." His words pierced me. Silence kills your voice. I wrote it in my notebook, underlined it 3 times. From then on, I made a vow. No more silence. Even if I stumbled, even if I looked foolish, I would speak. I would break the silence again and again until my voice grew strong. It wasn't easy. Some days I wanted to hide again. But I kept going because every word spoken was a seed planted in freedom. And slowly, something extraordinary happened. Speaking no longer felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. It began to feel like walking. Clumsy at times, yes, but steady. Natural, alive. One morning, while practicing with my podcast, I caught myself smiling. I whispered, along with the voice, "Good morning. How are you today?" Then louder, "Good morning. How are you today?" For the first time, it didn't feel like someone else's language. It felt like mine. That evening, I wrote in my notebook, Step 2. Speak, even in fear, even in mistakes. Silence is death. Sound is life. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just learning English, I was living it. Part 7. Small victories. Fear was the shadow. Then every spoken word was a candle. After weeks of practice, the candles began to multiply. Each one small, but together, they lit corners of my life I had never dared to enter before. The bakery, became my training ground. The cashier recognized me after a while, and I found myself greeting her with more confidence. "Hello, one bread, please." Sometimes I even added, "Thank you. Have a good day." She always smiled, and her smile made the bread taste sweeter in the cafe. I started ordering without rehearsing in my head first. My sentences were not perfect, but the barista understood. Once, I even asked, "Can you make it less sweet?" The words stumbled, but they came out. How these tiny exchanges, so ordinary for others, felt like triumphs for me. Each one was proof that English was not a wall, but a bridge, however fragile, stretching between me and the world. One afternoon, on the bus, a tourist sat beside me and asked, "Excuse me, do you know this street?" For a moment, panic surged. My throat closed, my old fear whispering, "Stay silent. Pretend you don't understand." But then I remembered Michael's words. Silence kills your voice. So I forced myself to answer. My voice shook, but I managed. "Yes, next stop. You get off, then turn right." The tourist smiled gratefully. "Thank you." I froze, stunned. He had understood me completely. When I got off the bus, my legs trembled, not from fear, but from joy. For the rest of the day, I replayed the moment in my mind, savoring it like a secret treasure. These small victories were invisible to the world, but to me, they were mountains climbed at night. I began writing them in my notebook, ordered bread without fear, asked for less sugar in coffee, gave directions to a tourist. Each line was a spark, proof that I was changing, proof that my voice was alive. Still, there were bad days. Days when my tongue twisted, when I mispronounced a word and saw confusion in someone's eyes. On those days, shame returned like a storm. I would go home, hide under my blanket, and think, maybe I will never be good enough. But then, I would open my notebook, read my list of small victories, and remind myself, progress is not perfection. Progress is movement, and so I kept moving. One evening, Michael asked, "How do you feel now when you speak?" I thought for a moment, still afraid, but also proud. "Every word feels like a step forward." He nodded. "Good. That is the truth about growth. Fear does not vanish, walks with you. But pride grows stronger with every step." His words stayed with me. Fear and pride, two shadows walking beside me. One heavy, one light. And I chose, again and again, to follow the light. Something else began to change too. I noticed myself wanting to speak, not just needing to. I wanted to greet strangers, ask questions, test new sentences. The fear was still there, but curiosity was louder. Once, in the park, I overheard two tourists struggling with a map. Before I could stop myself, I approached them and asked, "Do you need help?" The words came out shaky, but real. They smiled, relieved, and I explained the way as best as I could. When they thanked me, I felt a joy so pure it almost hurt. Helping them through English it was more than a small victory. It was a glimpse of freedom. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Small victories are not small. They are seeds of freedom." And I knew it was true. Every whispered greeting, every ordered coffee, every shaky direction, they were not just practice. They were revolutions, tiny ones, but enough to change my world. For the first time in my life, I was not learning English only to pass exams or impress teachers. I was learning English to live, to connect, to be more than the silent version of myself. And that realization was the greatest victory of all. Word count, approximately 1,210. Do you want me to keep going with part 8, Breakthrough Moment, where the narrator faces a bigger challenge, like giving a short presentation or joining a group conversation and experiences a life-changing turning point? Part 8, Breakthrough Moment. 4 weeks, I had collected small victories, like seashells on a beach. Each one precious, each one proof that I was changing. But deep inside, I knew something bigger was waiting. Something that would test me beyond bread, coffee, or directions. That moment came unexpectedly. One afternoon, my teacher at the community center announced, "Next week, each of you will give a short presentation in English. You can choose any topic." My heart stopped. A presentation in English, in front of everyone. The room buzzed with whispers and nervous laughter. I sat frozen, my mind spiraling. This is impossible. I can't even order food without shaking. How can I stand in front of a class and speak for 5 whole minutes? That night, I couldn't sleep. Fear gnawed at me, whispering that I would embarrass myself, that everyone would see how broken my English was. For the first time in weeks, I considered quitting. The next day, I went to the cafe, desperate for Michael's guidance. When I told him about the presentation, he leaned back and smiled knowingly. "Ah," he said, "your mountain has arrived." "My mountain?" I asked, confused. He nodded. "Every learner has one. A moment so big, it feels impossible. But if you climb it, you will see the world differently." I shook my head. "But I can't. My voice will shake. I'll forget everything. They'll laugh." Michael raised his hand gently. "Stop. You already know the enemy." I frowned. "Fear. No," he said. "Silence. If you stand there and say nothing, you lose. If you speak, even badly, you win. His words cut through me. I realized he was right. The real danger wasn't mistakes, was silence. Still, the fear was strong. But what if I fail? I whispered. Michael smiled softly. Then you fail forward. Failure is not the opposite of success, is the path to it. That night, I chose my topic, why I want to learn English. It felt personal, honest, and simple enough for me to express. I practiced every day. At first, my voice cracked, my tongue tangled, my sentences collapsed, but I kept going. I whispered to the walls of my room, to my reflection in the mirror, to the shadows at night. Slowly, the words began to flow, not perfectly, but with rhythm. Still, the fear never left. On the morning of the presentation, my hands shook so badly I could barely hold my notebook. My classmates went one by one, each voice filling the room. I barely heard them. My heart was too loud in my chest. Then it was my turn. I walked to the front, legs trembling. Dozens of eyes stared at me. For a moment, my throat closed. Silence pressed hard, tempting me to give up. But then I remembered Michael's words. Silence kills your voice. Sound is life. So I opened my mouth. My name is Anna, I began, my voice shaky but real. I want to talk about why I learn English. After it escaped, the rest began to follow. My grammar wasn't perfect, my pronunciation rough, but the meaning was there. I learn English because I want to speak to the world. I want to make friends, to travel, to not be afraid. At one point, I stumbled and forgot a word. My face burned and I wanted to disappear. But then I heard myself whisper inside, keep going, don't stop. So I smiled nervously and continued. And to my surprise, my classmates smiled back, encouraging me. When I reached the last line, my voice grew steadier. I learned English because English is not just language. English is freedom. Silence filled the room. For one terrifying moment, I thought they hadn't understood. Then, suddenly, applause erupted. The sound washed over me.
How warm.
And overwhelming. I bowed my head, tears stinging my eyes. I had done it. I had spoken, not perfectly, not fluently, but bravely. That evening, I ran to the cafe to tell Michael. He listened quietly, then asked, "And how do you feel?" I thought for a long moment, then whispered, alive. Michael's eyes softened. "Good," he said. "That is the true purpose of language. Not perfection, not rules, but life." I smiled. my chest lighter than ever before. The mountain had felt impossible, but I had climbed it, and from the top, the world looked different. Part 9. The transformation after the presentation. Something inside me shifted forever. It wasn't that I suddenly became fluent. I still made mistakes, still paused mid-sentence, searching for words. But the fear that had once chained my tongue was no longer the same monster. It was smaller now, weaker, almost like an old shadow I could walk beside without trembling. For the first time, I felt English moving through my life, not as an exam, not as a punishment, but as a living part of me. I began speaking more often, not only in class, but outside. At the market, I practiced greetings with foreigners. At the library, I asked for help finding books in English. At the cafe, I sometimes exchanged a few words with strangers sitting nearby. Every conversation was still imperfect, but each one felt alive. And with each attempt, I noticed something magical. People cared more about my meaning than my mistakes. One afternoon, a tourist asked me for directions to the museum. I explained as best I could, mixing short English words with hand gestures. He smiled warmly and said, "Your English is good." I almost laughed. Good. My English was broken, halting, full of errors. But in his eyes, it was enough. Enough to connect. Enough to help. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Fluency is not perfection. Fluency is courage." Michael continued to guide me, though less as a teacher and more as a companion. One evening, he said, "Do you notice how your relationship with English has changed?" I thought about it. Before, English was like a wall. Hard, cold, impossible. Now, it feels like a river. I just step in, and the water carries me. Michael smiled. Exactly. Language is not stone, it is flow. And now you are flowing. I began to live with English as naturally as I lived with my own breath. Music became my teacher. I sang along to songs, even when I didn't understand every word. Movies became my playground. I repeated lines, imitating the rhythm of the actors. Even silence became a teacher. In quiet moments, I whispered sentences to myself, letting my voice stretch and grow. One morning, I woke up and realized I had dreamed in English for the first time. It wasn't a complex dream, just me, buying coffee, exchanging simple words. But it felt miraculous. My mind was beginning to think in the language without asking permission. The transformation wasn't only about English. It was about me. I stood taller. I looked people in the eye more often. I dared to raise my voice. Not only in English, but in my own life. The silence that had once smothered me was lifting, replaced by sound, by connection, by courage. I also discovered joy in mistakes. Once, at the cafe, I asked for chicken coffee instead of chicken sandwich. The barista laughed kindly, and so did I. Instead of shame, I felt warmth. Because laughter, too, was connection. Michael once told me, "The day you laugh at your mistakes is the day you become free." And he was right. Every small moment, every shaky word, every smile from a stranger, they were no longer victories only. They were transformations, pieces of a new self being born. English had stopped being a subject in school. It had become a mirror. In it, I saw not only a learner, but a human being learning to live without fear. One evening, as I walked home under the stars, I whispered to myself, "English is easy." The words no longer felt foreign. They felt true. Not because the language itself was simple, but because I had changed the way I carried it. English was no longer a cage, it was a key. And I was learning how to use it to open the doors of my life. Word count, approximately 1,200. Do you want me to finish with part 10, A New Beginning, where the narrator reflects on the entire journey, embraces English as part of their identity, and looks toward the future with hope. Part 10, A New Beginning. There is a moment in every journey when you stop looking backward and begin looking forward. For me, that moment came quietly, without fireworks, without applause. It came on an ordinary morning when I ordered coffee, without rehearsing in my head, without fear tightening my chest, without even noticing that I had spoken in English. It felt natural, and in that ordinary moment, I realized I was no longer the same person who once hid behind silence. English had once been my enemy, my mountain, my shadow, but now it was simply part of my life, like the air I breathed, like the ground beneath my feet. Not perfect, not effortless, but alive, flowing, mine. I often thought back to the beginning, the trembling hands, the stuttering voice, the shame that burned like fire. If I could speak to that version of myself now, I would hold her hand and whisper, "Don't be afraid. The wall is only in your mind. On the other side, there is freedom." Michael had been right all along. English was easy not because it lacked challenges, but because it was natural. A language is not a cage of grammar rules. It is a bridge of sound, rhythm, and connection. Children know this instinctively. I had simply needed to remember it. Now, every word I speak is a seed of freedom. Every conversation, no matter how small, is proof that I am alive, that my voice exists, that silence no longer owns me. But the journey is not over. In fact, it feels like it has only just begun. I dream of traveling, of walking through streets, in distant cities, asking for directions without fear, laughing with strangers in cafes, telling my story to people who have never known me. I dream of making friends across the world, of listening to their stories, of sharing mine in return. Most of all, I dream of helping others who stand where I once stood, paralyzed by fear, convinced that English is impossible. I want to tell them, I was like you. I was afraid. I was silent, but I learned to listen. I learned to speak, and you can too. English is not your enemy. It is your freedom. One evening, I sat with Michael in the cafe one last time. The sun was setting, painting the windows gold. "Do you remember?" he asked, "the first time we met? You looked so afraid." I smiled, remembering my trembling voice, my hopeless eyes. "Yes," I said softly, "and I remember what you told me. English is easy." Michael nodded. "And now?" He smiled, his eyes shining with quiet pride. "Good, then. Your journey has only begun." As I walked home that night, the city hummed around me. Signs in English flickered on shop windows. A group of tourists laughed nearby. A song in English drifted from a passing car. And for the first time, instead of shrinking, I felt part of it all. The language no longer separated me from the world. It connected me to it. I lifted my face to the night sky, stars glimmering above, and whispered the words that had once terrified me, the words that had now become my truth. English is easy, tanned. In that moment, I knew this was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new one.